Your network as a bonsai tree. What do you mean by that?
In hindsight, everyone's like, you were so obvious that you were going to jump into sales.
100%.
It was less about that. It was about the learning and being a part of something that I felt like I could attach to the culture. And so when I joined Dropbox, I grew my hair out. I grew my beard out down to here. I just felt like I could bring who I was as an individual.
I could see you being, rocking the Midtown uniform, maybe doing a quick stint in Manhattan.
My Excel skills are going to need some work.
Yes. Something we hear from PLG companies is, I want a product-led seller. I want a PLG seller. To me, I'd actually want the top-down seller, assuming that they're not too salesy.
But I would tell my team all the time, right in front of them and say, stay low at the highs, high at the lows, because this industry is a roller coaster and it'll rock you. But I think most importantly, the first thing I always tell people is,
thanks for tuning in to the Vibescaling podcast. My name is Chris Balestris, partner at Vibescaling. We're a go-to-market advisory, recruiting, investing, and media firm, helping seed through Series D companies grow. Vibescaling podcast is an intersection of go-to-market, AI, and startup topics where we interview the top go-to-market leaders at AI and SaaS companies. Hope you enjoy it. Just had a great conversation with the legendary Kyle Parrish. For Kyle's background, he was one of the founding go-to-market hires at Dropbox, founding sales leader at Figma, where he wrote out a great 6.5-year run through their IPO. Now is advising some of the top AI native companies. So in that, we talk some of the highs, the lows from Figma, as well as Dropbox, best practices on founder-led sales, PLG to enterprise, things that he has seen work and not work. And if you're as much of a go-to-market and startups nerd like I am, I think you really enjoy the conversation with Kyle. So tune in and appreciate your support. Shout out to one of our sponsors for this episode, Condo. Think of it like Superhuman for LinkedIn. It's truly one of my favorite new tools that are out there. If you're terminally online like I am, I feel like LinkedIn I'm on a little bit too much, and you send a lot of DMs both in regular LinkedIn and Sales Nav. Sure, your inbox is a huge mess. Get the capabilities of hotkeys, reminders, labels, snippets. Helps you move fast, stay organized, and never miss any of those important replies. I've been going through my inbox about twice as fast. If you told me I couldn't use Condo anymore, you'd have to rip it out of my cold, dead hands. Truly one of my favorite tools that I'm using. So try it yourself at trycondo.com/GTM and hope you enjoy it. Now on the episode. A lot of people out there are looking for their Dropbox. They're looking for that sort of mafia.
Totally.
And that's you get that one chance, and you have extremely impressive background, early Dropbox and then early Figma. Congrats on a 6.5-year run.
Yeah,
and we'll get into what you're doing now from it. But yeah, tell listeners a little bit more about your background and who Kyle is.
Yeah. So I've been fortunate to kind of be in the startup land for going on 15 years at this point. And so I joined Dropbox early in 2011 as the third sales hire. We were starting to build out Dropbox for Business. Was there for over 5 years. Got to do a bunch of really cool things. One of the most notable things was opening our Austin sales office, which became kind of the go-to-market hub for the company. We hired 150 people in under 2 years. And so I think one of the fun parts of being a hyper-growth company like a Dropbox that's hyper-scaling is you get to do things that are far beyond your kind of years of experience. And it's sink or swim, and that's generally how these jobs work. And so grateful for that opportunity, and that was really fun. And then, I ended up joining Figma and been kind of following the company. To be honest, there's kind of these three core trends that I was following. One was collaboration, which we were selling kind of core to Dropbox.
Right.
And at that phase, call it 2015, 2016, every industry was getting disrupted by collaboration in some way, shape, or form. Seems a little different than the innovation we're seeing today. But at the time, it was groundbreaking stuff. And I was working with a lot of product leaders and design leaders in my job. I was leading a fairly large sales team, and we would talk about the roadmap and what's coming, and they'd want to hear from sales reps that are talking to customers every day. And we were looking at these static files, and the process was so archaic of all right, I'm going to take these sketch files that they're working on. We're going to put them up on a board, get your comments, get your feedback, take it back to the product and design teams. And it'd be these cycles that would kind of drag on for months at a time. So that kind of was like a light bulb that went off for me. And then I think the other big one was design, was just having this moment in Silicon Valley. You were seeing companies like Uber and Airbnb and Twitter, just blowing up and creating hundreds of billions of dollars of value. And a lot of that was focused on design, both brand design, but probably most importantly, UI, UX. The usability of these products was just far surmounting the previous vintage of startups that was coming out. And I think for us at Dropbox as well, we were hiring these prolific designers, Soleo and Rasmus, and these folks that were getting Business Insider headline articles about them joining the company. And so those three things, and then those kind of things. And then also these early grad engineers that left to join Figma. And so it hit my radar early on in 2016. And I reached out to the recruiter at the time and I was like, hey, this looks really interesting. Let me know if you're building a business team. They were heads down, like stealth, building the product. Didn't hear back.
Yeah.
And, fortunately, you got to meet Dylan in 2017 through some like investor introductions. And at the time, it was like self-serve. We're not building sales. And luckily, I kept in touch loosely. And then when the time came and they had 5 beta customers on this new enterprise product they were launching, they called me back, interviewed, and I joined in 2018. So was fortunate to join the company as like the 40th employee, first sales hire. We hired 2 people that they were already kind of talking to before I was in the job. So that was an interesting experience. And then over the course of 6.5 years, we scaled the business from 2 million to 950 million in ARR.
Wow.
and grew the sales org to almost 500 people around the world. So
insane.
It was the ride of a lifetime. And yeah,
To say the
so many
least,
great memories.
Yeah, yeah. And congrats on the recent IPO. And it's been great. Hopefully those get back into full swing shortly. But talk to me a little bit. Like you just said there that you were the first head of sales. What would you typically advise a founder? Like, would you say, hey, hire your first 4 or 5 reps first, or is common to just jump in and hire a head of sales first, or how are they thinking through that?
Yeah, I think it depends on the business. I think my background, I've worked at 2 notable companies with this like PLG bottoms up to enterprise adoption. And so at the time we had 2 million in ARR, but it was all credit card revenue spread over, a decent amount of companies. And of course the companies that we were working with, even in a beta, were like remarkable companies like Google and Square and Uber and Airbnb. So that's a pretty fortunate thing to walk into as an early sales leader. I think what I tell founders, and this is like the number one question that comes up, you have to have conviction that you're going to build a team of, call it 4 to 5 sales reps before bringing in that early sales leader. I think if you don't, you're going to bring in that person. Their instinct is going to build, hire, start to kind of scale up a team to kind of hopefully meet demand, assuming you have some fraction of product market fit. And if you're not quite there yet, either the founder hasn't really found that like repeatable motion in founder-led sales, or the conviction isn't high enough. If you have 4 to 5 sales reps, now you're managing all those people directly. Majority of these founders are technical. And so it's a new muscle to directly manage, coach, and kind of give feedback to these salespeople that are now selling your product. And it just becomes almost more work than it's worth.
Right.
So I think it's that balance of, I love, a couple of early sales reps to come out, figure it out, really take some of that bandwidth back from the founder so that they can do all the other things that they have to do as a CEO and like leader of the company. And then once that starts working and you're like, there's something repeatable here, and it's kind of a combination of the founder still staying heavily involved, maybe a sales rep or 2, you should start to go look at that leader. Because I don't think that you should try and get to 5 or 10 reps on your own as well. Like you're going to bring someone in, and I think it's always nice to have someone on the team. They're going to make their assessment if it's someone they want to continue working with, or if maybe not a fit for their vision of what they want to build.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you feel that moment happening, like go invest in a leader, someone who knows how to build from the early stages, who their expertise is kind of in the sales domain.
Right.
And then the relationship of sales leader reporting into technical founder, that's a whole area we have to invest in. And for most of these founders, when I spend time with them, they're like, how should I manage this person?
Yeah.
What am I looking for? It's very obvious, like revenue and revenue targets, but the process to getting there is even more important than the end goal. Of course, that's the end and thing we're all driving towards. But in those early days, it's very ambiguous. There isn't a playbook. You're developing the playbook together. And so I think understanding how to measure success when you're laying the foundation is really, really important.
Yeah, I guess, so you're saying if you were to advise a founder now, get 4 or 5 AEs that are up and successful, then hire that head of sales. It sounds like at Figma, it was in parallel. There were like 2 AEs that were being onboarded or about to be brought in. And did I hear that correctly in the beginning? And then you were also being brought in as the head of sales as the first seller, or was there already an existing AE team that was at Figma when you got brought on?
Yeah, there's no existing AE team. And so it was more in parallel. They were talking to 2 candidates. And I hadn't even joined, but it's accepted my offer. And they're like, hey, you should meet him. And it's like, grab the coffee, grab a beer. And I'm like, sure. I don't know the culture of the company quite yet, but they seem like pretty good salespeople. And they joined the company. So it was like that pod of 3 for the first 6 months, kind of like launching the business product, which happened in early 2019. And so my belief is like, I wouldn't necessarily get to 4 to 5 reps if you don't have some one is going to jump in and lead. I've seen this with a handful of companies.
I see.
Companies I've invested in or have advised, where they get to this point, you have 5-6 sales reps, but no leader. And then you have a technical founder who's doing a million other things, right? It just becomes
That's when you see the
more that they
chasm
can
of
handle.
complexity start to hit right around there.
Yeah, exactly. And
Got
it's
it.
like not great feeling if you're the founder, right? Like all these people, you brought them in, but you can't give them as much guidance or support as maybe they need. And on the rep side, you're kind of like flying blind, right? You're trying to sell the product. You're trying to figure out pricing and packaging. You're trying to build the customer feedback loop and of course execute on closing deals and kind of building momentum. And so I think up to 1, 2, call it 3 sales reps, you can kind of have them in your organization and they're kind of trailblazers in many ways. When you have conviction to build a team of 5, you need to bring in a leader to help you do that. Because if you're going to build a team of 5, probably means, in the following 6, 12, 18 months, you're going to build a team of 15, 20, 25.
They're going to bring in their people too. Yeah. And it's just like they'll have people that'll be able to accelerate that and scale.
It's time to start building. It's time to start building the infrastructure. It's time to start learning from people. And I think the optimal builder in a lot of these early stage companies is somebody who is comfortable with the ambiguity of building in the early days. Because when you show up, it's like, you can do anything,
right?
And so prioritization is the name of the game. You can do anything and you can also do nothing at the same time. They need to be comfortable with that, but then they've also had to stay in an organization long enough or worked at large companies to have some kind of blueprint for what excellence looks like. Because if you're just at a startup and you leave every 18 months, every 2 years, and the going gets tough or it starts to get more complex or the kind of scale of things is overwhelming to you, you don't have a blueprint of what you're building towards. And I think what I'm grateful for is the Dropbox network, which is like one of the best networks in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And still to this day, we're all so close and people are doing the most amazing things as founders and leaders of some of the top companies and folks in venture.
Yeah.
But also just like the hypergrowth and the scale, like we were forced to learn to like, how do you think ahead of like, what does the next level of the team look like? And so coming into Figma, I had that blueprint. When I left the company, Dropbox, I joined as 50th employee and I left and it was, over 2,000 people at that point.
Yeah.
The sales org was 400 plus. And so, you kind of have an idea of what it looks like, both on the what to do and maybe what not to do. Right? You learn just as much from both.
Let's dive into the first 4 or 5 reps. So as a founder, if your founder's listening or even they brought in a sales leader and sales leader wants to know, who am I hiring for my initial reps?
Yep.
What would you recommend, like 2 or 3 traits, whether it's like it could be qualitative or even quantitatively. And I've heard you on podcasts, and this is like that famous Harvard Business Review article of like the Renaissance rep. Can you dive in a little bit? Like, what does that even mean? And specific to a PLG organization, because those have been your 2 that you're very familiar with.
Yeah, there's this whole Stanford article that was published. It's almost 20 years old at this point, but it's about the sales learning curve. And it's not specific necessarily to SaaS or these AI native companies that we're talking about today. But for me, it still rings true. And it talks about kind of the journey from bringing in your early sales team, which are more Renaissance reps. I'll kind of like get to what that means.
Yeah.
And then eventually getting to more coin operated reps, which almost have this like negative connotation, but it really isn't in so many ways. So many people aren't built for early stage. They're not built for the lack of process, the ambiguity that it takes, the trailblazing. Like I talking to customers, and you don't have the perfect playbook from PMM or built through the sales organization.
Yeah.
You have to figure out a lot of this stuff on your own, and then you also have to kind of like collate a lot of tribal knowledge amongst a small team. So I think for me, how I think about Renaissance reps and how I think about the foundation of a team is both derived from my experience of what I saw at Dropbox, and then also like what we did at Figma and what I found success in. And I'm a really big fan in just bringing a diverse set of backgrounds in for that initial team. We had people.
How do you define, like, tell me a little bit more of like, what would be the ideal, like, oh, maybe we have a former consultant or banker, we have a salesperson, and we have maybe somebody who's like an industry expert. Like, and for Figma, it was like a designer that just wanted to get into sales. Like, how would you think through that as diverse?
Totally. So like, here's a flavor of a couple of the backgrounds that we hired for in that first, call it like 6-7 person team.
Yeah.
We had a person who was an ex-Olympian, transitioned into tech sales and had worked at Twitter and some other places where not directly translatable, clearly driven, clearly motivated, very competitive in the company sense, like a team player kind of competition mentality, and just very quickly drew to the community that was design. Didn't come from a design background. The Venn diagram of folks that had a design background and had a relevant sales background was relatively small. So that wasn't something that we could, build a big team around. So that was background from one of the persons that joined the team, and she was incredible and stayed at the company for over 5 years. We had someone who was in this rotational program in Intel out of college, doing everything from finance to business development, all these different roles.
Yeah.
Not your traditional come in and sell to our enterprise sales customers, but gave one of the best technical demos that we saw from anyone in a customer-facing role my entire time at Figma. Dylan was blown away.
Yeah.
And just like the aptitude, the interest in the business, like there was just something there. I was like, this guy's technical aptitude, maybe he'll grow into a sales engineer or something like that. But there's something here that's special. And early on, especially for the product that we were selling, the audience that we were trying to connect with, it wasn't a nice to have to be technical, to care about the space. You're not just like driving the methodology. You have to like really understand the passion that these people carry and the change management ask coming from the previous tool stack. And a lot of these builders, whether you're a developer or designer, like they really care about the tools in which they're working. So like this is a really big ask that we're making to get off your current kind of incumbent tool stack and move everything into Figma. And so he was another great example of like this kind of diverse background. And there was another person who was a Broadway performer. She sang at, performances with 100,000 plus people, kind of moved into more of an ad tech sales background in New York. Again, not as technical, not the same background. She'd be the first person to tell you that like out of the gates when she first joined, she wasn't spiking on the deeply technical stuff.
Yeah.
But when it came to charisma, when it came to doing really, really strong discovery, building relationships and trust, she was like, extremely above average and excelled in that arena. And then we were able to coach and kind of help round her out on the technical side. And the same goes for other people that spiked in other areas. I think generally one of the pieces of advice I got from an early leader at Dropbox was he told me, I respected this guy and he was doing really big things at the time. And we kind of had this like mentor friendship. And I said, hey, what's your advice for me? I joined Dropbox at 24, 25. I was a couple years in, maybe 27 years old. Kind of admired this career and just the way he showed up as a human as well on the team. And he's like, a lot of people will tell you to get better in the areas that you're weak. And he's like, there's a lot of truth to that, right? Like constantly have this like learner mindset and aim to get better every single day. He's like, but what's going to make you great is knowing your strengths,
just doubling
and
down,
leaning in, doubling down, tripling down. And that left a massive impression on me. And so I always focus on like, hey, I know where I can get stronger and I know where I need to continue to improve, but I also know where I excel, and I spend the majority of my energy making sure that shows up. And it's huge.
It's interesting you say that. We're having Sam Warburg on Friday, and Plaid's very famous for like this term hiring for spikes. It's the exact same sort of concept. It's just like, what do they spike in, and just have them double down on it, and then just have people that have those very distinct strengths to build out a team. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you build a diverse team, and especially early on, like it's parts this like tribal knowledge that you're collating, and you're all together in one floor. This is like pre-COVID in the Figma case. You're trying to build this team where if I'm the bottleneck, because early on as the first head of sales, you don't have enablement, you don't have rev ops and strategy, you don't have sales finance. Like there's just a lot of things that you're trying to do, and you're trying to not drop, as many balls as you possibly can. And so I can't be the bottleneck for everything that you learn, onboarding, coaching and feedback. There's going to be a lot of direct management. Of course, there was, and I take that very seriously. But at the same time, I need to build this team culture where you join this team and we're all learning from each other. Because anyone that's been in a hyper-growth company, you come the OG on the sales floor 6 months in.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, go talk to Chris. He's been here for 6 months, right? Like, you zoom out of the startup world, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But in startup land, like that's the truth. And so I need you to be able to take your area of expertise, take your area of spike, and kind of spread some of that knowledge across the broader team. And if I can get everyone in that foundational first 10 folks in the sales team to do that, we're going to build a really diverse, a really strong foundation that will be not only the culture, but also like the benchmark in terms of who we bring in from here and how we continue to scale and execute.
One thing, because I know you're the PLG guy, and then we'll move to like how a candidate can look at some of these companies, but something we hear from PLG companies is, I want a product-led seller. I want a PLG seller. I have no idea what that means. To me, I'd actually want the top-down seller, assuming that they're not too salesy, because they've done the harder thing. Eventually, the inbound's going to dry up, and maybe you want somebody who can prospect a little bit. what exactly does that mean? We want someone with PLG experience. Like, help me understand that, because I never really understand it myself.
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think it's kind of changing and evolving. I understand why people sometimes have that focus, and there is something to be said at the right stage in maturity of the company to have someone who's worked at a company where you have this data under the hood, because you have all these users. And at Dropbox, we pioneered some pretty cool things, and we took a lot of those learnings. And the CFO at Figma and myself both came from Dropbox, and we were kind of yin and yang in building this strategy that was recognizing that Figma had a lot of people signing up for this core product. End users, maybe not, managers, maybe not directors, VPs, C-suite, but they were champions of the product and they were using it. And we could use that, as kindling to kind of start fan the fire and build some momentum, and eventually turn it into this kind of enterprise momentum and this enduring company that came thereafter. Every great PLG company becomes more of a top-down company over time. The way Figma runs its business today is much more of like a top-down company. But as they launch products, they put it into the teams and users' hands so they can try it.
And then those AEs are equipped with that data to use as outreach and say, hey, some of your team has been trialing some of this.
Yeah, I think it's less even that. It's more so like you want to be upfront with your customers. Like, hey, we're launching this new product. We'd love you to try it out. But the relationship is with the executive team. It is trying to understand and be transparent and communicate up front on like what's happening, what's on the roadmap. Like that's part of the trust that you're building. So I do think that at early stages of these PLG companies, it's helpful to have some of that experience. But honestly, pretty quickly, we started evolving from like, I care less about you having PLG experience. That is a nice to have for sure if you've worked in a company or you've had to learn that. I care more that you have really fundamental, strong sales skills and a growth mindset, and we can teach you the rest on the PLG side. From a tooling perspective, we were able to build some really efficient stuff. So you have these insights. And in today's age, like we talked about this earlier, there's no excuse for not being prepared. Like you've got all these AI tools at your fingertips.
It's a sweet spot. We were saying how you don't want to be overly prepared, where it's like, oh, I quoted you. I was listening to you.
Yeah, you got to make it conversational.
So
you got to make it natural. But like I think you want to make sure that you come in prepared. And if you have a company that has like this momentum and traction, well, what are you learning? And it's not just like the data or whatever it may be, it's talking to the users.
Yeah.
And so a big part of our sales motion, at least in the first couple of years, was actually talking to end users to understand, hey, why is someone at Electronic Arts or Chase Bank using Figma? I'd love to get your perspective. And then that is a key part of how you drive this like much bigger business case and kind of value story for the leadership team. Because maybe that individual designer 2 years out of college that picked up Figma or used it in university and is now in the workforce, maybe they love it. That doesn't mean that Chase Bank's going to flip their entire team over to Figma. And so, I think it's important. I don't think that people should like over-engineer on it, to be honest, as the
It's just something
PLG
that's funny
guy.
that I'll hear. And then, building on the team, I think that's a lot of really good info.
Yeah.
Talk about it from a candidate perspective. You have two major hits and like big runs, and a lot of people that we speak to have trouble getting that shot. What are the things that they should look out for? It sounds like you've cracked a niche for yourself in PLG. Would you recommend, hey, start there because of reasons where you already embedded trust that they're already using your product? Like if I'm an AE and I haven't gotten my shot yet, what are the things that I should be looking for in a company for me to, outside of like fast revenue growth, like what are the other?
Yeah, it's a good question. What's kind of interesting is like we don't call it PLG as much in like today's current era.
Yeah.
But a lot of the fastest growing AI companies right now kind of are PLG. And so I think that there are a lot of great PLG businesses or bottoms up businesses that just allow you to have this flywheel where you don't have to spend a ton of money on advertising and marketing. You get people starting to use the product. And then you learn from those people using the product and you iterate and you build a better product and you start selling and monetizing and going up market. So I do think there's a lot of great companies out there that you should be looking at. But I think most importantly, the first thing I always tell people is give a shit about what the company does.
Yeah.
I will never lead a cybersecurity sales team. Some of the biggest companies in the world are out there and they're solving problems in the cybersecurity place. It's just not for me. I just don't get excited about it.
What about, is it just like naturally there's certain topics you're drawn to?
I'm just not intrinsically drawn to it. Like I am drawn, I guess more to like tools that drive innovation in the workforce. So like Dropbox, people coming from these server environments to the cloud and collaborating and working in this like seamless, more efficient and productive way. Figma going from anywhere from 4 to 10 tools to this one tool that's browser based and powerful. And, people are saying, I love Dropbox. Like it evokes emotion. Figma. I love Figma. Like no one says I love cloud storage. I love design platform. But these are products that are so well built, and I tip my hat. Like I join companies that are product led. That is my thing. Outside of even the sales motion, they focus on bringing in the best engineers, the best designers, the best product people.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to be a go-to-market person, a salesperson, like, don't you want to be on that side?
100%. It holds the product and engineering team to a higher bar, because for them to even do that and then there's already, like I said, embedded trust as a seller. It could make for the right PLG company a very fulfilling role, because then they might be already using it, already loving it, and because they have to self-serve on it. So I've always found that interesting when we talk to candidates that want that. They're like, I'm only looking for product-led companies because of, like I said, that high bar that the engine product team need to have. So
yeah, and I could never test an engineer, but when you're around the great ones, and I've been fortunate to experience that twice now at Dropbox and Figma. And so I think that's important, so like being interested in the market that they're going after, the company, the team, all of that. Like you have to do your due diligence. And for me, when I came as a head of sales, it was really important that the founder that I'm going to be working with and helping build this company over the next, what came to be 6.5 years, has a really strong moral compass. And so I think someone who's like a really good person and you think has really, really high potential as a leader, which is something that I saw in Dylan. And of course, a lot of people who invested in the company and joined the company saw in him as well. And so I think it's really important to just realize that picking the right company that, yes, has traction, that you're interested in, you're going to get dressed every single day and get fired up to go talk to customers, talk about the product internally, externally. You talk about that company and what they do and the audience they serve all day long. So if you're not curious, interested, passionate about it, it's just going to make for a long career. And for me, I just wouldn't have been as successful doing, what I've done.
You, because of those runs now, and after leaving Figma, you're advising a bunch of these hot startups. I'm actually curious about some of the common either mistakes that you're seeing founders either get advice about or that they're making, whether that's hiring the founding team or at a PLG company, maybe going up market. So take that however you want. But what are those common threads that like founders should look out for?
Yeah, I guess one of the themes that I'm kind of seeing right now is maybe some short-sighted thinking on just hitting a revenue target to hit the revenue target. And maybe that's going to trigger the next round of fundraising, or maybe it's just to kind of meet some goal internally that's set. Of course, we all want to do those things, but I think it's the way in which you go about it and making the right decisions so that you can be a winning company 5, 6, 10 years from right now. Of course, things are moving extremely fast in the AI era. And so I understand that in a lot of ways. But I think the companies that are going to endure and stand out are the ones that, hey, I hope you're exceeding revenue targets far faster than you expected, but making the right decisions in terms of assembling the right team, building the right products, figuring out the right go-to-market motion, and doing it with a longer-term plan and vision in mind versus like, I don't care, just by the end of this year, we need to get to 5, 10 million ARR, and I'll do anything, take any shortcut to get there.
Yeah.
Like that's a little concerning. And I also think in this AI era, when I joined Dropbox and when I joined Figma and we started building the team at Figma, we all hope that the economics work and that the company is super successful. And one day you're looking at it and it's got its own ticker and it's gone public and all those things. Like those are the amazing moments. And if you're fortunate to experience one of those things, you want to see it again and again and again. But I think a big part of it is like, we joined these companies as a missionary. Like we wanted to be a part of this team. I knew, having come off the Dropbox run, even successful from Series B to IPO, that it's a long run to get there. And so I think it was about assembling with the team you're joining. And, I'm not bought into like, hey, it's a family, but you're very much a group and this like tight-knit assembled crew. And I think there's like a lot of individualism that I see across some of these AI companies where it's like, everything's happening so fast. We're shooting stuff out of a cannon and people are so focused on maybe their economic, chunk of what this company could be and how fast it's going. And I think founders should do a lot more to instill culture and the foundational roots for making it an amazing place to work and make it a place that's sustainable. Make it a place that like, yes, we're going to come in, we're going to grind, we're going to work extremely hard, but I also want you to be here 4 years, 5 years, 6 years from now. tenure is extremely underrated. And I think some of the gains you get from having the same groups of people, and especially leaders at these companies, continuing to thrive, build, grow the teams and orgs and accumulate larger teams, it's undeniable. But there's a lot of people that are kind of like in it for themselves, and you can kind of see that, I guess, having been in the game as long as I have.
Do you ever come across people that are hiring sales too early and you need to push back on them? We see this a lot running a recruiting business, that sometimes they raise a round and they see how fast Cursor's growing and they say, we need to be at like 50 million next year. We're at 1 or 2. Maybe not that aggressive, but like 10 to 15 million without the pipeline to do it. And it's a pressure of where other companies are growing. It's pressure of that they just raised around, and that's just the VC game a little bit. How do you push back on founders to not to like treat sales? Sometimes it's like, hey, this is like somebody's life that we're about to like hire, and then you don't want to set them up for, you want to set them up for success. Do you ever come across that? Because that's something that like we definitely see as a pattern of like hiring sales too early. And I'm curious if you've come across any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that know or don't, Figma notoriously, the company had been around for 5 to 6 years before it kind of made its first dollar of revenue, building in stealth, building an extremely complex platform before they were ready to kind of share it with the world and start bringing in those like early believers, those early designers to try the platform. And in today's age, there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a handful of companies that have just shattered every revenue target that we thought was the previous milestone of these past vintages of startups.
Yeah.
But I do think that, I talked to a founder the other day of this open source kind of developer tools company, and he realized he came out and was trying to juice revenue or kind of, grow customers.
You've said this a couple times, like juicing revenue. And we see all these articles of like experiment ARR. People are saying that is ARR. How do you go a little bit deeper of what you're seeing, and obviously abstract this away from it? We won't need any details, but is it, hey, we're taking these 3-month pilots and we're multiplying it by 4 to get like our annual, and we'd say that that's our ARR number? Like what actually is happening?
Yeah, no, I don't even mean necessarily juicing in any negative connotation, but I think it's more so like just the pressure to like sell and convert and show revenue and put points on the board.
I see.
Like I always use this analogy, like you're an enterprise sales rep, you better get really comfortable with like points on it being on the board for a while. In some of these scaled out companies, like you just have to be like, I have a process, I have a plan, I'm going to stick to that plan, I'm going to execute. And when this year is done, my sales year is done, I'll have a banner year, but it might take some time, right? And I think some of these founders have to kind of embrace that same mentality. Like they have to have a plan. They have to start thinking about what is the go-to-market motion. And there's a lot of the questions I spend time asking them about. But that doesn't mean that depending on the business that they're building, the customers that they're serving, that they have to start showing revenue in the first 6 months from building. And some of these founders feel that. And so, it's talking to this founder who's building this open source company, and he regrets. And even a lot of the investors he's talking to are like, hey, maybe you try to start monetizing this business too early versus getting a lot of developer love and building this kind of community, which is what Figma did, fantastically. Dylan and Claire early in the marketing team, they built this community of people that were some pessimists, but eventually became the strongest and earliest believers that were really influential on the broader community in kind of helping ushering us in as the, platform of the future. And so again, there's always that time where it's never perfect. You can't say, I can wait for 4 years, maybe 5 years, like what worked for Figma. I think that might be an anomaly in today's age. But I think they have to embrace, when is the right time? Is the product ready? Do you have a plan? What are you trying to do? There's a lot of these paid pilots, like you said. And I think in the age of AI, a lot of these companies incur a lot of costs out of the gates. And so how much do they defer that to customers in these like early design pilots versus, what is long-term revenue? What does it look like to have, those first kind of couple contracts that you're signing? So yeah, I do think that every case is unique. And so I can't say like broadly everyone's trying to make revenue too early, because if it is the right time and it's repeatable, like absolutely run with that. But if it feels like you're forcing it, and if it feels like you're making product decisions and building a roadmap to serve your 5 customers versus build what is a really interesting company that's going to upend the market, like you need to rethink your strategy and kind of like slow down a little bit.
Yeah, all makes sense. The thing I'm thinking about now for this next like pivot is, you'd said in a past podcast that one of the go-to-market teams that you really admire is Slack. And you also said the caveat of that Stuart hired sales. They notoriously were like, we're not going to hire salespeople. And it probably was one of the reasons why Microsoft caught up so fast with Teams. I'm sure you've seen some pattern of this, whether advising PLG companies. For those that are listening that are at PLG companies or even founders, what are the typical pitfalls that you see, whether it's hiring sales too late or making that move from pure PLG to enterprise to like scale them past 100 mil? Any learnings from that? Maybe some Dropbox did well that took longer for Figma or vice versa, or things that you learned from Slack. Like I'd love to hear just that sort of upmarket progression and your take there.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think one thing is when you are starting to hit like that kind of critical mass and things are moving really quickly, I think it's easy for a lot of founders to be like, I need engineers, I need salespeople, right? More and more, I see less founders that aren't believing that they need to have sales teams in building an enterprise software business, but they don't necessarily think as much about all the supporting roles. And I'm the first person to say the best day of my life as the head of sales was when we brought in someone who had an area of expertise and was now going to take ownership of this new part of the go-to-market team and business that was not going to be on my shoulders anymore.
What are those? So
bringing in RevOps and strategy, bringing in enablement, bringing in partners across all these different parts of the business. We had these designer advocates, which was basically a role that we kind of built at Figma, where a lot of organizations will have sales engineers. Maybe they sell to IT or sell to other technical parties. We had former designers that were so excited about Figma, loved the product, loved the community, that they came over and they kind of did a number of things. They helped with live customer demos. They helped with like post-sales implementations. They helped running live streams, which was the cooler way of saying webinars. They helped with like online content and just community development. And they were like the unsung heroes for the go-to-market motion. So like these types of roles, or understanding some of these like ratioed roles that support your sellers. Because if you're just going to get 15 salespeople, but not have these supporting roles that make them successful, even the best head of sales out there, they're not going to be able to do all those things.
So if you're a head of sales looking for your next opportunity, then what I'm hearing a lot of this is actually marketing. And Figma, you call it design advocates. At a developer tools company, it's maybe a developer advocate. If you're at another company that doesn't have design or developer focus, it's probably marketing. I think like what I see is, hey, you build the product, then you need to market the product. And a component of that is the customer stories, content, that love of your product. I guess like, what if you were the head of sales? So in that example we said earlier in this, you hire 5 reps, you come in as the head of sales before you accept your offer. What is the one thing you're asking for out of all those roles that like 80-20 is a lot of that burden off your shoulder?
Yeah, I think a really, really strong and experienced RevOps and strategy partner is probably my number one. And I think why that person has to be experienced is because there's a cadence to this business that you just need to know and understand. The quarterly, close and refresh and start as you're hyperscaling and hiring all these new reps. You're cutting new territories and books all the time. As you start to layer in new products or test out new strategies, like there's just so much work that has to happen. And the reality of my job, especially in our busiest times, was I could spend 40 hours some week just on interviews. So all the other work I did outside of that, internal meetings and interviews, I could be on, literally on Zoom in an office for 35 to 40 hours a week. And so there's a lot of strategy work. There's a lot of execution stuff. And like, you need to be able to like make those calls and influence them. But I can't be doing that and then, trying to do all that in the middle of the night. Like, you're only one person. So I think a really strong partner that you trust, that understands the business, and that can also build and scale a team, under the broader revenue org is absolutely critical. And I tell people, again, it goes back to like 5 sales reps, you have conviction, hire a sales leader. You see conviction or a path to 10 to 15 plus reps, start to build out a supporting team. And RevOps and strategy and someone who can kind of own that stack and all of the kind of pillars under it is absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's good to know. Pivoting to like a couple of, I guess, Kyle-isms that I'm very, very intrigued with. So some things that either in past podcasts or you and I have talked about is this treating your career as a bonsai tree.
Your network.
There we go. Your network as a bonsai tree. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. I have some weird, anyone that's worked with me or spent time with me knows I have some quirky, weird analogies that come on the fly, and some of them I keep and some of them I don't. But I think the thing that I came out of Dropbox realizing, and I think I had a good reputation in Dropbox because I worked hard. I loved being a part of like the company, the mission, everything. I realized, a lot of my colleagues all went to these Ivy League schools and came from these crazy backgrounds. Like, in so many ways, like I wasn't the prototype to plug into that situation. And I think that gave me, a chip on my shoulder as well to learn from these people, to create these really strong and lasting relationships and friendships in many cases. And and I think when you leave a company, you think that, oh, maybe that was that experience at Dropbox. But like we talked about earlier, everything is so small in this industry. And so I tell people early on in their career, like, don't just do great work, take the feedback, get better. That's like the number one thing, right? But also spend time cultivating your network. And I don't mean cheesy, you're going out to events 4 days a week and you got to be a networker. I'm not a traditional networker by the sense,
right.
But I spend a lot of time meeting people across the company, up and down the company, and just creating lasting relationships. Some of the SDRs we hired at Figma will be future VPs of sales at some of the greatest companies in the next 5 years. And I have no personal gain other than like I learned from all of these people. And for me, my reputation is something I still want to nurture and take care of. But if you're 22, 23 out of school, like we talked about, you actually got that job at Figma, you got that job at Cursor, or you got that job at insert next company.
Yeah.
You want to make the most of it. And it's not just about doing the thing, which you should do, and learning to get better and cultivating your craft. It's also about like growing your kind of network of people that are going to support you. Because whether you stay there for 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, when you leave to go on to do whatever you do in your career, people are going to back channel you. And whether you like it or not in this industry, it is very tight knit. And so having a strong reputation and spending energy thinking about that and cultivating it, and most importantly, not burning bridges, I think just goes a long way. And not enough people think about that when they just get their career going or join one of these breakout companies.
Yeah, makes sense. The other thing that we were talking about is this mercenary versus missionary. You've said missionary a couple times, but one thing that you said was you're seeing a trend, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, we can always cut it, but is that there's more mercenaries maybe trending in that direction than there are than maybe missionaries that you've seen maybe 10 years ago. Is that right? Or like, how do you see this trend maybe weighing out a little bit?
Yeah, and anytime you're doing broad generalizations, it's not always the case. And we should probably rebrand mercenaries and missionaries. Are a little intense. But I just said that at a handful of companies and talking to people, I'm still very connected to many people that are at these leading companies, whether these are leaders, reps, et cetera. Like I'm mentors, friends, like deeply in this community still. And I think there's just a lot more individualistic thinking. And I think a lot of
what do you mean by that? Yeah, dive in a little bit more.
Yeah, just a lot of that starts with like the leadership team. Like if you're an early stage startup, sure, maybe you feel that way if you join a much larger company, right? You join a publicly traded company. You want to come in and do your job and be a part of it. But like you're by nature a little bit more risk averse, right? This company's
for sure
going to be successful. Maybe your ownership in the company is going to be far less, but you want to go do well. You're going to get this stock that's publicly traded. And, it's kind of like a fairly safe bet. You want to work hard, be part of a great company and culture. And that's great. And that's fit for a lot of people. If, like many people in your audience, I imagine, want to join these early stage companies, they want to be a part of the sausage making in the building, which is not as glamorous always as it looks, right? You join these companies and like you need to be a part of something that I think is bigger than yourself and feel that. I think the best leaders are the ones who create environments where you feel like, for us, make design accessible to all, right? Being a part of this company that was changing the forefront and is synonymous. Like, they had an amazing tagline. This was after I left in the IPO, but like design is everyone's business. Like these are the things we would rally around. The impact we were making in the world as a company. And as a startup, you're kind of the David to the world's Goliath.
Yeah.
And you grow and grow and you become this formidable force that can actually become that. And I think a lot of early stage companies, Series A, Series B, seed, whatever, you get companies that are like hyper focused on just like maxing out their comp plan and just doing their thing and less about helping Chris, the new hire who joined a couple weeks ago. And so there are still examples of where that's happening. And I think that's just a testament to strong leadership. But in this age of AI where everything's moving super fast, culture is still fundamental. And I don't mean, all the fluffy things of culture. I've experienced
ping pong tables and kombucha.
Yeah. I've experienced a lot of the different eras and opulence of culture. But I think
especially
at the core,
didn't Dropbox have like sushi chefs and stuff? And it was
we saw a lot of cool things. Annual Tahoe trips.
Good old Zerp.
Great memories. But I think culture is the people you're in the trenches with, building this company with. It's about doing great work. It's about learning. It's about getting better. And a lot of the times when you're on these like crazy wild rides, you don't even realize how much you've grown, how much you've learned until you've gotten off, or maybe you take a couple of weeks going on vacation, you have a moment to reflect. When I left Dropbox, it didn't hit me how much I learned until I was back in an environment where I could like learn how to apply it in Figma.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of recognizing the ride I went on at Figma, all the things I've learned, had an opportunity to be a part of. And so I think having that missionary mindset and being like bonded together, not just with your sales team, but like the broader company. I'm really close with folks that are engineers and designers and marketers and recruiters and everyone across the company, right?
Yeah.
Like we all felt connected, and there's this amazing foundation. And also big kudos to Dylan, who like really, really put culture and a strong foundation of being a part of Figma and what that meant at the forefront. I think a lot of companies, it's just like, join, here's your laptop, and we're just guns blazing, catch us if you can kind of mentality. And so I just don't think that like some of the best, most enduring companies are going to look like that. They're still going to have this core foundation of a really strong culture. And once you get past much bigger companies and maybe the equity ownership in these companies get smaller, what are these people joining for? They want to be part of something special. And I think if you're going to attract, retain, and keep growing really, really large teams, people want to come and do it for more than just like, I'm going to hit my number and like W2 XYZ, right?
Yeah.
That's cool, but that's not what gets me motivated. That's not what inspires me to do my best work every single day, in my opinion.
Yeah, all really well said. And you said something in there, the not as glamorous piece, as you were discussing. I take this as some of the things that you were saying of like the highs, stay low when it's high, stay lower when it's high, and higher when it's low, and kind of that equilibrium. That's something that you had said last week when we were chatting. From the outside in, looking at Dropbox and Figma, it just to me looks all up and to the right. I'm sure that is not the case at every startup. Like there are highs and lows. What stands out, and you can like combine this in both Dropbox and Figma, as a high that you remember and maybe a low that like at the moment was tough and you got through it and you come out of it better for it. I'm curious if you have an example of each of those.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of not glamorous, I started my career out selling payroll. And so a lot lot of my companies...
Shout out to ADP. That's a good entry-level role for a lot of folks. Actually, quick question, like what was the reason why you said something in a past podcast where you're like, there's something about how they motivated their people, and like it is a little bit more of a, I don't want to be too derogatory, but like maybe a little bit boiler roomy at times where like
very boiler roomy.
So tell me a little bit more of like, what about that culture did you not like?
So I had a job. I was a finance major in '08. I'll keep this brief, but I had a job to go, join this bank and kind of work in banking and kind of be in a cubicle, and that was kind of
tough year to do that.
Yeah. And of course, it was 2008, and it already started crumbling in '07. So that job was taken off, and so instead of like just kind of scrambling in some ways, we took the opportunity, me and 4 roommates in college, to backpack India, Southeast Asia, and up the coast of China, ending in Beijing for the Olympics. We had no money to go to the actual Olympics, but we were in the town and got to experience some of the magic. And this was like low budget backpacking, which, one of my passions is traveling and like seeing the world and experiencing other cultures. And so when I got back, I was like, all right, now it's time to like figure out your life. And I wish I could say I came to San Francisco because I wanted to, go help build startups, but that wasn't the dream. I just knew that I wanted to be in the city where, the history, the lore, like was really drawing for me. I'm from Southern California originally. I wanted to be in a big city, and there was just so much innovation and magic. And like, I was like, I'm 22 years old. Like I want to go be immersed in something.
You were seeing this at 2010, 2011. Is that when you were, or even 08?
I joined in January of '09. And so I started interviewing in the late half of '08. And so a good friend of mine who I grew up with, she went to Berkeley, and she, also was like, what am I going to do when I grow up? And found this job in sales. And in hindsight, everyone's like, you're so obvious that you were going to jump into sales.
100%.
But I had
no
no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was like, no, I was going to be in finance working in the Cube, and that was my dream.
I can also see that. I can see you being, rocking the Midtown uniform, maybe doing a quick stint in Manhattan.
My Excel skills are going to need some work.
Yes.
But so I talked to my friend. We grew up together, and she was like, hey, I got this job at ADP. It's really renowned sales training. And that was what they were known for, right? Boot camp, super hardcore. We had to drive out to the office that was out in the East Bay, and they'd get all the different regions in the Bay Area together.
I'm picturing a Wolf of Wall Street, almost like just trying to like motivate.
Yeah,
everybody.
less glamorous than even that.
Yeah.
But like you have to stand up and then say, hey, Chris, what'd you sell this week? Right? And if you nothing, right? Like that feeling is like physical in front of a room of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So that was like,
Dang.
you're born in that kind of culture. And I hated so much of like the corporate culture, and kind of going back to how important culture is in startup land, and, you know, being able to, like, as a leader, help steward a culture that you want to be a part of and that you think resonates with the audience and what you're trying to do from a sales perspective. But I found a way to be really successful. And the former COO of Dropbox, this guy Sujay, when he hired me, you know, it's actually in this GSB case study where he kind of talks about how he was building a diverse sales team. And he's like, we got someone who went to Stanford and did this, and this person from Princeton and whatever. And then this guy who went to University of Arizona and like was selling payroll. And he asked me, he's like, so where are you like stack ranked in the 400 people? And I was like, well, I'm like the second person, you know, I'm 24 years old at this point. And he's like, well, what's the difference between you and the number one person? I'm like, well, they've been there for 15 years. You know, they built this career around it. So I found a way to be successful. I worked really hard. I didn't like a lot of it, but the fair and unfair advantage that I had was that I was doing this in the Bay Area. And so I had people that were actually working with companies like the Dropboxes and the Figmas and the Slacks and these next generation companies. And the more and more I saw the startup world, like from the, you know, looking glass, looking in, I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Not because like it was easy even back then, the Facebook IPO, whatever, you know, and all the companies predating that for the past 30, 40 years. But it was easy to be like, wow, look at that. You know, this publicly traded company and these people are making all this money and having so much fun and riding scooters around Google, et cetera, et cetera. It was less about that. It was about the learning and being a part of something that I felt like I could attach to the culture. And so when I joined Dropbox, I like grew my hair out. I grew my beard out down to here, you know, and like, I just felt like I could like bring who I was as an individual and show up as a professional and learn. And that unlocked everything for me. If I would have tried to stay in the ADP culture, my career would have gone nowhere. I'm like almost certain. But joining a startup and joining a company like Dropbox that also had a really, really strong focus on culture, it kind of unlocked my superpowers and allowed me to learn. And then I was around these people that are some of the highest achieving, most humble, most welcoming people that I've met in my entire life.
Yeah.
And you build off of that and you feed off of that. And then you kind of start to get, you know, you get addicted to it and you kind of continue to say like, this is fun. This is dynamic. And then, you know, as the companies do better, right? That t-shirt of your startup that nobody knew and thought was a stupid name, they're like, oh, Dropbox, Figma, right? And that's a pretty fun kind of part 100%, of it.
I think.
But for me, it's all about the building.
Yeah. And I think most people that are listening are saying the same thing. They want that shot, or maybe they've had it and they had it in SaaS and they want it in AI. So I think that's inspirational, and it's awesome to hear a lot of that. With a couple minutes left, I'd love to just throw some rapid fire questions at you that I'm curious of. One thing is like, if you can go back and tell earlier Kyle one or two pieces of advice or one piece of advice, what would you tell yourself?
Stress out less. You know, I'd have these periods of time where like when you're building your career, right, it's intense and you don't always know what's happening behind the closed doors or the virtual closed doors. If your team's remote, it's like, oh, it's about me or this. And it's like, no, everyone's just building. And generally people are trying to do the right thing. And I've worked at great companies with great leaders and people that I've learned from and grown from and all of that. It's like focus on the thing that matters. And as I've gotten further on in my career, I start to worry less about those things. I think less about those things. I focus on being really coachable, learning and adapting to being the best leader I can. And ultimately like being a steward of the business and driving the business forward in the best way that I can. So I think focus on the stuff that matters, block out the stuff that doesn't, and continue to build a really strong network around you.
Connecting back to something you said earlier reminds me of that book. I think it's by Bill Walsh or something, like the score takes care of itself, right? You put in the right inputs and don't stress over the things maybe you can't control or what people are saying necessarily. As long as you're just working hard and putting in those inputs, it's like that's really all you can do. And it's the whole control the controllables sort of thing.
Totally. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I would tell my team all the time, there's all these companies that were on a sugar high in COVID, you know, raising every 6 weeks and getting a little boisterous. Oh, we're going to be the next this and that.
You say that's a COVID thing, and not much has changed.
Well, no, it's happening now.
Yeah,
right?
And
this feedback is like more pressing now than maybe ever before. But I would tell my team all the time, right, in front of them and say, stay low at the highs, high at the lows. Because this industry is a roller coaster and it'll rock you. So don't focus on this stuff. Don't focus on these companies and the FOMO mentality that exists. Focus on what we're doing and what we're building and taking care of your people and taking care of your customers and getting better at your craft every single day. Because there's a lot of FOMO that can be overwhelming for a lot of people in this industry.
Yeah. What's one tactic that has died, a death in 2025, or a piece of common sales advice that founders would come to you and you just don't agree with? I'm curious.
I think a lot of founders still underestimate doing really, really good discovery and understanding their customer's business. I think when you're a founder, which I can't speak to it, I'm not a founder, I haven't been a founder, and I don't know that I ever will be, but like, they're very excited about what they built. They have to pitch it to investors, they have to pitch it to employees. Like, they're fired up, right? And hopefully they have this passion that needs to be let out by way of building a company to go, complete their mission, solve a problem, do all of these things. But as a byproduct, I think they fall into a trap when it's founder-led sales early on of wanting to pitch too early, wanting in a 30-minute call to ask 3 generic boilerplate questions, jump on a demo, and then push to a next step, and that could be a trial environment, that could be like a next call. And it's okay to have multiple calls, right? Like, we all know one call closes. If you're in sales, great, right?
Yeah.
Not always scalable, not always repeatable, but early on, you want to understand the people you're working with, whether they're design partners, your early kind of first annual contract customers. You're selling for the long haul. And when your customers are buying in those early stages, it's fairly like evangelical. It's like, come with me. We're on this mission. The core product, what it is today, is really not what they're buying. They're buying the founder, the sales leader, the sales rep, the people on that team, whoever else is like talking to customers, the dream of where you're going, that you have this high conviction, you have a reason to build this company, and we're going to partner up with you.
Yeah.
Most buyers, they're not looking at vendors in this 1-year time horizon. They want to pick the winning horse. They want to say, these guys get it. And the folks that bet on Figma early, they built these relationships with the companies, all the alphas and betas. Like, we had these strong ties with them. And you remember that, right? They get preferential benefits of being early and kind of flipping over.
Yeah.
And then they were the guinea pigs. And then, your 100th customer, it's less scary to kind of jump on board. So I think doing really, really good discovery and like surrounding themselves more with like this business acumen of what the customers care about and why they'd buy your product versus like the wedge to the problem you're solving, right? I think it's easy to get trapped in overly focusing on that, like that one little thing versus like, why are we here? Why are we talking? Why would you let my company, drive your business forward?
Yeah, all makes sense. And final thing, what's 6.5 years at Figma? What did you do? What did you do after? What are you doing now? Like, what's the goal? What's the next hill for you? Could be personal, professional. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So leaving Figma is definitely, you get off the roller coaster, like I said earlier, and it's a bit of an adjustment. And so a lot of this year has been spending time with my family. I've got 2 young kids, a sick parent, with my wife, working on personal kind of goals, professional goals. I've been doing a lot of advising, investing, kind of exploring like what the next chapter for me might look like. I do think I'll probably spend more time like going deeper in the investing world, which has been a lot of fun. I think at this point in my life and career, I'm almost more valuable to a breadth of companies that are starting up, scaling up, whatever it may be, than just joining and going really deep on one company. So that may change, but to be honest, I'm really like enjoying the variety of my day. It is an adjustment from being so deep in one company. Yeah. Unfortunately, that was the right company to be deep on, and I made relationships that changed my life forever. I learned so much, and I just feel so fortunate to have been on a journey with the right type of people, really, really good people, and of course, an incredible outcome that everyone now knows about.
Yeah, I think your story is super inspirational for a lot of people that are looking for that career win for themselves. So I really appreciate this last hour. It's great to finally meet you. I've
awesome.
listened to you on a bunch of podcasts, and then a bunch of people in our network have said such great things. So really appreciate your time, and until next time. So
all right, cool. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Of course, you got to call. Really appreciate you giving us a listen. Give us a subscribe, rating, review, follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Hope you enjoy it.